What if I told you that everything you know about yourself, your name, your past, your purpose, your very identity, was not something you discovered, but something that was given to you? A script handed down the moment you entered this world. And what if that script was never written for your benefit, but for the benefit of those who rule you? Think carefully. The moment you were born, you were labeled. A name was placed on you. A nationality was stamped onto your existence. A religion was whispered in your ear before you could even speak. From the very beginning, you were placed into categories, into boxes, into cages of thought. You were told who you are and what to believe long before you had the chance to ask the most important question. Who am I, really? But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Everything you think you know about yourself was built on top of an absence, a silence. You were made to forget. And that forgetting was not natural. It was deliberate. Forgetting is the first act of control. Because a human being who remembers, who truly knows where they came from, cannot be manipulated. They cannot be ruled by fear, by dogma, by authority. They see through the illusions of power. And that is the single greatest threat to every empire that has ever existed. This is why the story of who you are begins not with memory, but with amnesia. You don't remember the choices you made before you came here. You don't remember the covenant you agreed to. You don't remember the path you walked before birth. All of it, covered, hidden, stolen. Look back at history. Have you ever wondered why every empire, every church, every ruling class was obsessed with controlling knowledge? Why libraries were burned? Why heretics were silenced? Why forbidden books were destroyed? Because knowledge is freedom. And there is no greater knowledge than the memory of the soul. The rulers of the world understood this better than anyone else. If the people remembered who they were, eternal beings, choosing their lives, they would no longer kneel. They would no longer obey. They would no longer fear death. And so, that knowledge had to be buried. This isn't just a story of the past. It is still happening now. Look at how society is structured. Education teaches repetition, not exploration. Religion tells you obedience is holiness. Governments insist that safety lies in submission. Media keeps you distracted with endless noise. The system is designed not to awaken you, but to keep you asleep, to keep you forgetting. And yet, even through all of this, the truth leaks through. Have you ever had déjà vu? That eerie feeling that you've lived a moment before? Or a dream so vivid, so powerful, it felt more real than waking life? Or a sudden connection with a stranger, as if you've known them forever? These are not accidents. These are cracks in the wall of forgetting, echoes of the memory that was stolen from you. Nikola Tesla understood this better than anyone of his time. While the world remembers him as the genius who played with electricity, few realize the depth of his insight into the unseen. Tesla once said, "If humanity began to study non-physical phenomena with the same seriousness as it studies visible ones, it would make more progress in a decade than it had in all previous centuries." He wasn't speaking of fantasy. He was warning us. He was telling us that behind the material world lies a hidden architecture, a vibrational structure of reality, one that we have been conditioned to ignore. Tesla himself experienced visions, flashes of light, geometric shapes, whole inventions arriving in his mind fully formed. He described them not as ideas, but as transmissions, information sent from beyond the veil of forgetting. And this terrified the establishment. Because if Tesla was right, if human consciousness truly is an antenna, then every one of us already carries the truth within. We don't need priests or politicians or institutions. We already have the connection. And if humanity discovered this, the systems of control would collapse overnight. Now ask yourself, why do you sometimes feel restless, even when life seems perfect? Why do you feel an emptiness that nothing in the material world can fill? Why do you long for something you cannot name? These feelings are not flaws. They are signals. They are your soul trying to speak to you. They are proof that the forgetting is not absolute. Something within you is remembering. But here's the uncomfortable part. Remembering comes with responsibility. Once you know the truth, you cannot unknow it. Once you see the system for what it is, you cannot return to blind obedience. And that is why this knowledge has been hidden for centuries. Because a person who remembers is uncontrollable. They do not yield to fear. They do not bow to lies. They do not play the role assigned to them. They become free. And freedom terrifies the system. So tonight, as you listen, I want you to breathe deeply and ask yourself, what if everything you've been told about your life was wrong? What if the truth is that you are not just a body, not just a mind, not just a citizen, but a soul with a memory stretching far beyond this single existence? What if the emptiness you feel is simply the echo of that memory calling you home? Stay with me, because this is not just a story of history. It is the story of you. And the moment you begin to remember, nothing will ever be the same again. Over 12 centuries ago, in an age when knowledge was more dangerous than swords, a manuscript appeared. It bore no author's name, no dedication, no claim to fame. It was given a title in Latin, Anmi CEX. To the few who laid eyes upon it, the text was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was not a religious sermon, nor a political treatise, nor even a scientific document. It was something far more unsettling. It was a map of the soul. The manuscript described, in painstaking detail, what happens before birth. Not after death, as so many traditions had speculated, but before. What occurs in that mysterious gap between eternity and the first cry of an infant? According to the diagrams and coded verses inside, every soul undergoes a sacred sequence, a vibrational journey, before entering the body. Each stage held purpose. Each choice was intentional. And above all, it revealed that forgetting was not a flaw, but part of a system. Those who first studied the manuscript whispered of its strangeness. It contained geometric drawings that resembled constellations, but they shifted in meaning depending on how you looked at them. It described tones and vibrations that the soul would hear long before ears existed. It read like poetry and mathematics fused together. It was not meant for scholars, but for souls. And then, almost as soon as it appeared, it disappeared. Official records claim it was lost. But let's be honest, knowledge does not simply vanish. Books are misplaced, but entire manuscripts, known and referenced by multiple sources, do not dissolve into thin air. They are removed. They are hidden. They are erased. History is filled with such erasures. Consider the Library of Alexandria, the great treasure house of ancient knowledge, reduced to ash, or the countless Gnostic texts destroyed by the Church because they contradicted official doctrine, or the scrolls burned during the Qin dynasty in China to eliminate philosophies that threatened the emperor. Whenever knowledge challenged power, it was obliterated, and Anmi CEX suffered the same fate. Why? Because the truths inside threatened the very foundation of control. Imagine what would happen if people knew that their lives were not random accidents, not punishments from angry gods, not meaningless struggles, but choices. If farmers and peasants, soldiers and servants, kings and slaves alike knew that they themselves had chosen their bodies, their parents, even their hardships, how long would they remain obedient? How long would they tremble before priests demanding loyalty, or rulers demanding taxes, or masters demanding labor? A population that knows it is eternal cannot be enslaved by fear of death. A soul that remembers it chose its path cannot be manipulated by threats or bribes. If people believed suffering was not divine punishment, but a lesson they themselves agreed to, they would rise above it. and the empires built on obedience would collapse overnight. That is why the manuscript vanished. It wasn't neglected by accident. It wasn't misplaced. It was systematically erased from history, removed from libraries, banned from translations, mentioned only in fragments, in whispers, in the margins of other works. But fragments survive. A few scattered references in forgotten archives. A few coded allusions in private letters. The whispers of monks who copied it in secret. Enough to tell us that the manuscript once existed and that it terrified those in power. Think of the Middle Ages, an era where even suggesting that the earth revolved around the sun could lead to execution. Do you really think knowledge describing the soul's journey before birth would be tolerated? Of course not. It was too dangerous. It was dynamite under the foundations of church and state alike. And so Anmi CEX became a ghost, not destroyed by time, but murdered by intention, erased from shelves, removed from memory, buried under centuries of silence. But here is the paradox. Truth cannot be killed. Even when hidden, it leaves echoes. And those echoes ripple through time, finding their way into the visions of scientists, the intuitions of mystics, the sudden longings you feel in the middle of the night. The manuscript is gone, but its resonance remains. Today, very few have even heard the name. Fewer still know what it contained. And yet, whether you realize it or not, you felt its shadow. In your dreams, in your restless questions, in that sense that life has a secret shape you can't quite grasp. That is the fingerprint of Anmi CEX. Its pages may be gone, but the truth it carried is alive in you. So ask yourself, if an entire manuscript could be erased from history, how many other truths have been stolen? How many other memories have been silenced? And what would happen if, despite all their efforts, you began to remember? Stay with me, because what comes next will reveal not just why you forgot, but why forgetting was forced upon you. Imagine this. Before you entered the body you now inhabit, before your first breath, before your parents even knew your name, you were somewhere else. Not in a physical place, not in a city or a land, but in a field of consciousness. There, you were not small. You were vast, limitless, aware of everything. And in that place, you were given a choice. According to the fragments of Anmi CEX that survived, each soul participates in what can only be described as a covenant, a sacred agreement. This was not punishment, nor reward. It was preparation. It was design. You chose your parents. You chose your body. You even chose the challenges, the heartbreaks, the losses that you would endure. To the human mind, this sounds insane. Who would choose pain? Who would choose grief? But to the soul, the perspective is different. Pain is not failure, it is a teacher. Loss is not punishment, it is expansion. Every challenge is an opportunity to remember what cannot be learned in comfort. Think of it like a play. Actors agree on their roles before stepping onto the stage. One plays the hero, another the villain. They know the beginning, the middle, and the end. But once the curtain rises, they must forget it all. Otherwise, the play feels false. Their emotions would be hollow if they knew the outcome. But if they immerse themselves, if they truly believe in their roles, then the story becomes real. They feel real love, real anger, real fear. This is the essence of the forgotten agreement. To forget, so the experience becomes authentic. And yet, even in forgetting, the covenant remains. Buried deep within you is the memory of having chosen. That is why you sometimes feel déjà vu, that strange sensation that you've lived this moment before. That is why you sometimes meet someone and feel as if you've known them forever. That is why dreams sometimes feel more real than waking life. These are not accidents. These are echoes of the agreement, surfacing in fragments. Modern psychology struggles to explain these phenomena. Déjà vu is dismissed as a glitch of memory. Dreams are labeled subconscious processing. Sudden connections with strangers are chalked up to coincidence. But what if all of these so-called coincidences are cracks in the wall of forgetting? What if they are reminders that you are living a story you once wrote yourself? Consider the countless stories of children who recall vivid details of lives they could never have lived. A boy in India who described his past family's names and even the manner of his death. A girl in Scotland who spoke of a village destroyed decades before she was born, giving exact details of streets, events, even family secrets. Researchers dismiss these accounts as imagination. But what if they are glimpses of the agreement? The child still carries memory before the veil of forgetting fully seals. Even in your own life, you may feel the pull of the covenant. Have you ever had a sudden realization that a struggle you faced shaped you in ways nothing else could have? Have you ever looked back at your life and thought, I would never have chosen that pain, yet also known, deep down, that without it you would not be who you are? That is the paradox of the agreement. The human self resists it. The soul embraces it. But here's the crucial truth. The forgetting was not just natural fading. It was enforced. According to Anmi CEX, the moment of birth includes an intentional shrouding of memory. As the soul lowers frequency to fit into the body, its vast awareness contracts. Think of a vast ocean forced into a tiny cup. The water is the same, but the container is limited. Memory cannot fit into the fragile vessel of the human brain. And so it is hidden, not gone, only hidden. And why? Because the system needed it to be that way. Imagine a world where billions remembered their covenant. A world where no one feared death because they remembered choosing life. A world where suffering did not enslave, but liberated. Do you think empires could stand against such people? Do you think rulers could maintain their grip? No. So forgetting became part of the design. Not only cosmic design, but societal design. Religion took advantage of it, claiming to hold the keys to mysteries you once knew yourself. Governments exploited it, teaching that safety comes only through submission. Education reinforced it, drilling repetition into children instead of exploration. Forgetting became the foundation of civilization as we know it. But forgetting is never perfect. The covenant leaks through. That restlessness you feel, that longing you cannot explain, that emptiness even in moments of success, these are reminders. Your soul has not forgotten. It is calling to you, softly but insistently. The agreement is still alive within you. So here's the question. Will you continue to live as if you are a random accident, powerless and small? Or will you begin to listen to that inner echo, the memory of a choice you once made? Because once you begin to remember, the world around you changes. Suffering becomes less of a punishment and more of a teacher. Fear becomes less of a prison and more of a challenge. And you realize that the story you are living is not imposed. It is chosen by you. This is the heart of the forgotten agreement. You are not here by mistake. You are here by choice. And the moment you remember that, nothing, absolutely nothing, can control you again. If the covenant of the soul is real, if you truly chose your life before birth, then why is it that almost no one remembers? Why would such profound knowledge be hidden from us? The answer is simple, and at the same time, deeply unsettling. Because forgetting is profitable. Forgetting is control. Throughout history, empires have always relied on obedience. But true obedience requires fear. And nothing fuels fear more effectively than ignorance. Ignorance of who you are, ignorance of where you came from, ignorance of your own eternal nature. When you forget, you become dependent. Dependent on priests to explain your purpose. Dependent on governments to tell you what is safe. Dependent on teachers to decide what is true. And in that dependency, you are ruled. Look at religion. For centuries, the church has proclaimed that you are born broken, sinful, powerless. Salvation, they say, is not within you but outside of you, granted only through rituals, confessions, donations, obedience. If you remembered that you chose your life, that your soul is eternal, and that death itself is only a doorway, would you tremble before threats of hellfire? Would you give your gold to buy forgiveness? Would you bow to men who claim they alone speak for God? Of course not. Your memory would shatter their authority in an instant. That is why you were told to forget. Look at governments. They survive on loyalty. Flags, borders, anthems. All illusions designed to convince you that safety and order depend on rulers. They say, without us, you would perish. But if you remembered your soul's agreement, if you knew you were eternal, you would no longer fear death. You would no longer fear chaos. You would no longer cling to their promises of security. Control would collapse overnight. Look at education. From childhood, you were taught to memorize, to repeat, to conform. Creativity was punished. Obedience was rewarded. Schools do not exist to awaken memory. They exist to bury it deeper. You were trained to silence your intuition, to ignore your inner voice, to distrust your imagination. Because imagination is dangerous, it is the first step to remembering. And then there is the media, endless noise, news cycles built on fear, entertainment designed to distract, advertisements that whisper, you are not enough, but if you buy this product, maybe you will be. All of it engineered to keep you locked in the surface of life, too busy to listen to the subtle whispers of your soul. The forgetting is reinforced daily, hourly, relentlessly. But here is the deeper truth. Forgetting is not just a cosmic veil. It has been weaponized. Systems of power have taken advantage of a natural limitation and turned it into a tool of domination. They built religions, governments, schools, and industries around your amnesia. They profit from it. They expand it. They make sure you never pause long enough to question it. Think about it. Why is meditation discouraged in so many religious traditions unless supervised by clergy? Why do governments fear individuals who spend too much time in silence, in contemplation, in rebellion against routine? Why are dreamers mocked, visionaries silenced, mystics cast as insane? Because silence, contemplation, and vision break the trance. They open cracks in the veil. They remind you of who you are. Even language itself has been shaped to keep you small. Notice how often words like impossible or hopeless are used in everyday conversation. Notice how society mocks those who speak of past lives, visions, intuition. You are told to be realistic, as if reality is only what can be touched and measured. But what if reality is far greater than what the senses perceive? What if the so-called unrealistic is closer to truth than the mundane? And yet, despite all of this, the cracks cannot be sealed completely. Have you ever felt that the world around you were off somehow, as if a curtain was covering something just beyond sight? Have you ever experienced a moment when time itself seemed to pause, and for an instant, you felt infinite? That is not madness. That is memory. It is the soul refusing to be silenced. The rulers of the world need you to forget because memory is rebellion. If you remember, you cannot be controlled. You will not kneel to fear. You will not buy into false promises. You will not waste your life serving systems that thrive on your amnesia. This is why they keep you distracted. This is why the manuscript was erased. This is why Tesla was ridiculed. Because the moment humanity remembers, the game is over. So ask yourself, how much of your life has been shaped not by your soul, but by forgetting? How many choices were made because you believed you were powerless? How many times did you surrender because you feared what was never real? And what would happen if, right now, you began to remember? What would change in you? What would collapse around you? Forgetting is their greatest weapon, but remembering is your greatest rebellion. And once you begin to remember, the entire system trembles. Nikola Tesla is remembered in history as the eccentric genius who gave us alternating current, radio signals, wireless transmission, and dreams of free energy. But what most people don't realize is that Tesla's true heresy had little to do with machines and everything to do with consciousness. Tesla once declared, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." On the surface, it sounds like the musings of a scientist fascinated by waves and currents. But Tesla meant something deeper, something that shook the foundations of both science and religion. He was telling us that reality itself is vibrational, that matter, thought, emotion, and life are all frequencies, patterns of energy resonating in a vast field. And if that was true, then human consciousness was not trapped inside the skull. It was part of the field itself. Tesla admitted that from childhood, he experienced strange visions, flashes of light, floating geometric shapes, entire machines appearing before him, fully formed, as if downloaded into his mind. He didn't call these inspirations. He called them transmissions. He once said, "I do not invent. I see the ideas. They appear before me." To Tesla, the mind was not the origin of thought. It was a receiver, like an antenna tuning into invisible signals. He compared his brain to a radio, picking up frequencies from beyond the physical senses. What kind of frequencies? He never fully explained. But those close to him said Tesla spoke privately of higher intelligences, of an unseen structure behind reality. Now consider this. If Tesla's claims are true, then humanity is not blind, isolated beings crawling on a rock in space. We are transmitters, receivers, participants in a universal broadcast of consciousness. This was knowledge so dangerous, it made empires tremble. Because if people knew they could access infinite intelligence directly, without priests, without rulers, without mediators, what need would they have for authority? What fear could be used to control them? Look at what happened to Tesla's work. During his lifetime, he was alternately celebrated and ridiculed. Newspapers mocked his eccentric habits. Scientists dismissed his visions. Governments ignored his patents until they realized how powerful they were. And then, much of his research vanished. After his death, the FBI confiscated trunks of his notes. To this day, many of those documents remain classified. We are told they contained only harmless experiments. But ask yourself, if it was harmless, why hide it? Why bury it? Why erase it? The answer is simple. Tesla's machines may have generated electricity, but his ideas generated something far more dangerous: liberation. If human consciousness is a receiver, then each of us is already connected to the source of truth. You don't need to be told what is real. You can feel it. You can tune to it. You can live it. That makes you uncontrollable. And uncontrollable humans are the greatest threat to any system built on obedience. Tesla himself hinted at this. In rare interviews, he described entering states of silence where visions would overwhelm him. He spoke of patterns of light that guided his work. He admitted to moments when he felt a presence, a force greater than himself, pouring knowledge into his mind. These were not inventions. They were memories, echoes of the same covenant described in Anmi CEX. Cracks in the veil, delivering fragments of the forgotten agreement. Of course, the establishment had to silence him. Think about it. Why is Thomas Edison celebrated as the father of electricity, while Tesla is painted as the mad genius who died poor? Edison worked within the system: patents, profits, power. Tesla threatened the system: free energy, direct access to truth, the dismantling of control. That is why Edison became the icon and Tesla the cautionary tale. But despite their efforts, Tesla's warning survives. His words about vibration, frequency, and energy echo louder today than ever. Modern physics now confirms what he hinted: matter is not solid. It is vibrating fields. Consciousness interacts with these fields in ways science barely understands. Quantum entanglement, non-locality, observer effect, all of it pointing to the same conclusion Tesla reached a century ago. Reality is not what it seems. And we are not powerless observers. We are participants. So why does this matter to you? Because every time you feel intuition, every time you sense something beyond logic, every time you receive a sudden idea or vision, you are living Tesla's truth. You are tuning into the field, and that is your birthright. You are not a machine, not a servant, not a pawn of systems. You are an antenna for the infinite. And the moment you embrace that, you break their spell. Tesla's life is both a warning and an invitation. A warning of how far the system will go to bury forbidden knowledge, and an invitation to remember what he remembered, that the universe is vibration, and you are already part of its broadcast. You don't need permission to listen. You only need the courage to tune in. So, ask yourself, what signals have you been ignoring? What visions have you dismissed as fantasy? What if they were transmissions waiting for you to recognize them? And what would happen if you began to follow them? That was Tesla's secret. That was his warning. And that is why his name still resonates. Not as a scientist of machines, but as a prophet of consciousness. We are taught to see birth as the most beautiful beginning, the miracle of life. But what if birth is not the start of your story? What if, in truth, it is the moment of your greatest loss? The moment your memory was stolen. According to Anmi CEX, the instant a soul crosses into the physical world, something happens. Its vast awareness, infinite and expansive, is compressed into the fragile vessel of a body. Like an ocean forced into a cup, the soul contracts, lowering its frequency to match the density of matter. And with that contraction comes the veil. The memory of all that came before, the choices, the agreements, the knowledge, is hidden. Not destroyed, but locked away. This is why newborns cry. We are told it is the shock of light, the sting of air in fragile lungs. But what if it is more? What if it is the soul mourning its imprisonment? Imagine soaring freely, boundless, connected to everything, and then waking in a body so small, so helpless, so limited, that you cannot even speak. The cry of the newborn may be the first echo of loss. But for a short time, the connection remains. The veil does not slam shut instantly. In the early years, children are still half on the other side. That is why so many recall strange memories, names, places, lives that do not belong to them. A boy in India, at the age of 4, described his past family and the way he died. A girl in Scotland told of a village destroyed decades before her birth, giving names of streets and people she could never have known. Another child in America spoke of flying planes in World War II, describing details that stunned military historians. Science calls these coincidences or products of imagination. But how many coincidences does it take before they become evidence? These cases are not isolated. They are countless, documented across cultures and continents. They are proof that memory survives birth, that the soul remembers, even if the world tries to erase it. And yet, as the child grows, the connection fades. Parents dismiss their words. Teachers laugh at their stories. Society tells them, it was just a dream, just imagination, forget it. And slowly, the veil thickens. By the time the child becomes an adult, the memory is buried so deeply that only fragments remain. Occasional dreams, sudden feelings of déjà vu, unexplained longings. Why would this forgetting be necessary? Think of life as a test, or better yet, as a performance. If you entered this world fully remembering that it was all a play, that death was not real, that pain was chosen, would you ever truly feel? Would you ever experience love as heartbreak, loss as devastation, joy as triumph? Or would it all feel like lines spoken on a stage, empty of emotion? Forgetting makes the play real. Forgetting allows us to live the story as if it were the only one. But there is another layer, a darker one. The forgetting was not only cosmic design. It was seized and used by systems of power. Rulers realized that an amnesiac population is easier to control. People who fear death are easier to enslave. People who believe they are powerless cling desperately to leaders, to saviors, to authorities. And so, the natural veil became weaponized. What began as a spiritual necessity was turned into a political tool. Birth became not just the entry point into life, but the entry point into a system of obedience. From your first breath, you were wrapped not only in blankets, but in stories. Stories of identity, nationality, religion, gender, class. Stories that told you what to believe, who to obey, and what to fear. These stories are the chains laid upon the newborn, replacing the vast memory of the soul with the small narrative of society. But the truth leaks through. Have you ever held a newborn and seen the way they stare, wide-eyed, as if looking not at you, but through you? As if they still see something beyond this world? Have you ever wondered why young children speak of imaginary friends, invisible companions, strange visions? Perhaps they are not imaginary at all. Perhaps they are glimpses of the other side, glimpses adults have forgotten. Tesla himself believed this. He once said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of existence." He saw children as closer to that truth, uncorrupted by the dogmas of adulthood. He believed their visions and dreams were not madness, but memory. So birth, though celebrated, may in truth be the soul's greatest tragedy. It is the moment the covenant is hidden, the moment the actor forgets the script, the moment the infinite becomes small. But it is also the beginning of the journey back. For the soul does not forget forever. It waits. It whispers. It pushes through cracks in the veil, reminding you of what was once known. The question is, will you listen? Or will you let the memory slip further, until the play consumes you entirely? Birth is not just the start of life. It is the stolen moment, the day your soul was forced to forget. And yet, within that loss lies the seed of awakening. Because to be born is also to begin the journey of remembering. Knowledge has always been the greatest threat to power. Not weapons, not armies, not gold, but knowledge. Because knowledge awakens. And an awakened population cannot be ruled. That is why, throughout history, the most dangerous act was not rebellion on the battlefield, but remembering who you are. Think about the great empires of the past. Why did the Romans persecute early Christians? Because they carried ideas that undermined the empire's gods. Why did the church burn Gnostic texts? Because those writings said the divine spark was already within you, and that you did not need priests to reach God. Why did the Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang order the burning of thousands of philosophical books? Because rival ideas threatened his absolute rule. Again and again, we see the same pattern. Destroy the knowledge, and you control the people. Anmi CEX was no different. It wasn't destroyed by time, but by intention. The manuscript didn't vanish into dust, it was actively erased. Why? Because it revealed the most subversive truth imaginable, that before birth, you chose. You chose your body, your parents, your struggles. You entered this life willingly, as part of a covenant. And if people knew this, fear would evaporate. Death would lose its sting. Pain would lose its grip. Who would kneel before priests or kings if they remembered that they themselves had written their destiny? That is why the manuscript had to disappear. Not because it was unimportant, but because it was too important, too powerful, too dangerous for those who thrived on obedience. And so began the war on memory. Institutions built entire systems around keeping humanity asleep. Religion told you that salvation comes only through obedience. Governments told you that order depends on loyalty. Education told you to memorize, not to imagine. Media told you what to fear, what to buy, what to desire. All of it designed to keep the veil in place. All of it designed to suppress the whispers of memory rising within you. Consider Tesla again. Why was he ridiculed, dismissed as a madman, while Edison was celebrated? Because Tesla threatened the system. The spoke of vibration, frequency, resonance, ideas that point directly to the truth of consciousness. He believed the mind was a receiver, not a generator. He believed knowledge flowed from a universal field, accessible to all. If humanity embraced that, rulers would lose their monopoly on truth. So, Tesla's name was buried in ridicule, his notes confiscated, his visions erased. This pattern repeats everywhere. Prophets silenced, mystics exiled, scientists mocked, whistleblowers imprisoned, not because they were wrong, but because they were too close to the truth. Ask yourself, why is it that the most revolutionary knowledge is always ridiculed first? Why are visionaries always called mad before they are called geniuses? Why do governments fear thinkers more than soldiers? Because soldiers can be fought. Thinkers awaken minds. And once a mind awakens, it cannot be enslaved again. The suppression of knowledge isn't just history. It's happening now. Look at how spiritual experiences are dismissed as delusions. Look at how children's memories of past lives are ignored. Look at how research into consciousness is underfunded, while weapons research receives billions. The system doesn't want answers. It wants silence. But the truth has a way of leaking through. No matter how many manuscripts are burned, no matter how many visionaries are silenced, no matter how many lies are told, truth survives. It survives in myths, in dreams, in intuition, in the sudden chills down your spine when something resonates too deeply to ignore. It survives in you. And here lies the paradox. The more knowledge is suppressed, the more powerful it becomes when rediscovered. A single forbidden manuscript, a single silenced visionary, can ignite revolutions centuries later. Tesla's words, dismissed in his time, now inspire millions. The whispers of Anmi CEX, though buried, now return through fragments, through echoes, through your own awakening. So why was the knowledge suppressed? Because those who remember cannot be controlled. They cannot be herded like cattle, taxed like property, ruled like subjects. An awakened soul is fearless, and fearlessness is contagious. If one awakens, others follow. If many awaken, the system crumbles. That is why they fought to erase it. That is why they still fight to this day. But the cracks are widening. The more they suppress, the more people begin to question. The more they hide, the more people begin to seek. And once seeking begins, suppression loses its power. So, the question is not why the knowledge was suppressed. The question is, why is it resurfacing now? And what does that mean for you? Despite centuries of suppression, cracks have always appeared in the veil of forgetting. Strange dreams that feel more real than waking life. Déjà vu so powerful it chills the spine. A sudden intuition that proves correct against all logic. These are not accidents. They are signs. They are leaks in the system of forgetting. Think about your own life. Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid that it lingered all day, as if it were a memory rather than imagination? Have you ever met someone, and felt instantly connected, as though you've known them forever? These are cracks, brief moments when the soul's memory shines through the veil. Modern science dismisses them. Religion ignores them. Society distracts you from them. But if you pay attention, you begin to see a pattern. The veil is not impenetrable. It tears again and again, giving you chances to remember. And as Earth itself shifts its frequency, these cracks are widening. More and more people are dreaming vividly, experiencing synchronicities, feeling restless in lives that no longer fit. The system calls it anxiety, depression, or coincidence. But perhaps it is none of those. Perhaps it is awakening. According to the fragments of Anmi CEX, there are 5 practices designed to pierce the veil and help the soul remember. 1. Silence. Daily stillness 5 minutes or more to allow the inner voice to rise above the noise. 2. Writing. Asking your soul a question and letting the answer flow onto paper without judgment. 3. Observation. Paying attention to recurring struggles, patterns, or triggers. They point to lessons you chose. 4. Care for vibration. Nurturing the body with breath, rest, food, and intention to keep the soul's signal clear. 5. Service. Offering presence, creativity, or compassion to others. When you give, you realign with purpose. These practices are simple, yet they are revolutionary. Because if billions practiced them, the system of forgetting would collapse. That is why they were hidden, not because they fail, but because they work. Right now, millions of people are feeling the cracks in the veil. Across the world, synchronicities are increasing. Dreams are intensifying. People are questioning the systems that once seemed unshakable. This is not collapse, it is recalibration. The Earth itself is shifting in vibration. You can see it in the unrest spreading globally. You can feel it in the emptiness of old routines. You can sense it in the way people are searching for more, something deeper, something real. The system calls it crisis, but perhaps it is birth. The birth of a humanity that remembers. The first waves of an awakening revolution. And now comes the moment of choice. You can ignore this. You can dismiss it as another story. You can return to forgetting. That is always an option. But once you begin to remember, you cannot unknow. Once you sense the cracks in the veil, you cannot pretend they are not there. Once you feel the resonance of truth, the system's illusions lose their hold. This is why Anmi CEX was erased. This is why Tesla was ridiculed. This is why forbidden knowledge is always buried. Because when you remember, you are free. And freedom terrifies the world built on control. So, ask yourself, will you go back to sleep, or will you take the first step toward awakening? Will you live as if you are powerless, or will you live as if you chose this life, as if you are eternal, as if your soul is far greater than you've been told? If this truth resonates with you, don't let it fade. Share it, spread it, subscribe, so this message cannot be buried again. Because remembering is not the end, it is the beginning. One awakened soul can change the entire world. Perhaps that soul is you.